So that always begs the question, are they overvalued right now?
You know, I think what we're seeing is a movement into riskier assets over the last 6 months. And what we found in emerging markets is that certain asset classes or certain parts of emerging markets are indeed overvalued, whereas other areas of the markets are not. So it really is, you have to be very careful where you're putting money these days in emerging markets.
So where are you putting money? Where do you see the value?
Yeah, I think what we've found over the last year is areas like consumer staples, tobacco, some alcohol names, consumer products have become very, very expensive as people have looked for that yield and looked for that steady growth. So companies that don't have that steady growth, perhaps more cyclical companies like consumer cyclical names, some industrials, haven't done as well and do offer some interesting valuation opportunities.
Can you give me an example or two?
Sure. I think a couple names we've been looking at are in the telecommunications space have been very interesting. In India, for instance, we have a large position in Bharti. Bharti is the largest cellular communications company in India. The sector has suffered not only from slower growth in India over the last year, but also from some adverse regulatory changes. As the air clears around those regulatory changes and the competitive environment related to those changes stabilizes, we think that company is very well positioned.
Derrick, you have some internet holdings as well, don't you?
We do, and notably in China, we have a reasonably large position in Sina Corporation. Sina Corporation is not only a standard internet portal for China, but also what they call a microblogging or a Twitter service as well that's very important in China.
And China itself, obviously, you know, we saw headline after headline months ago about worries about a hard landing in China. Are we beyond those worries now, or is that still a risk when we're focusing on some of the big countries in Asia?
Yeah, I think that obviously we've seen some pretty good cyclical data out of China recently as the central bank there has fairly aggressively eased. But I think the distortions in the market that existed prior to that haven't gone away in terms of what we view as a housing bubble and certainly infrastructure spending that will be very low return projects. So we are concerned about a continued slowdown in China looking out over the next couple of years.
And is that the biggest risk in emerging markets right now, is an economic slowdown? I mean, in some ways I feel like that's always a risk everywhere. Is there something specific to EM that investors should pay attention to and think about before they're investing?
Yeah, I think that investors need to be very careful of following themes or stories in emerging markets and not keeping an eye on the underlying business models or the underlying valuations. And
overall valuations will stay compelling this year?
Overall valuations are okay. There are areas, particularly in consumer staples, as I said, where we think valuations are very stretched, and we would expect that to reverse. But there are other areas where we are finding interesting valuation opportunities.